Okay.
Why do we separate the sexes in the Olympics?
At this point, I will not entertain your provocations.
Got it.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've stumbled across this video where Piers Morgan brings on Dr. Anastasia Gabriel as the only liberal voice on a panel of 5 people to debate trans athletes in sports. And what happens next is honestly one of the most frustrating examples of bad faith debate tactics I have ever seen. You've got Piers, Graham Linehan, and the rest of the panel constantly interrupting her, talking over her, and setting up gotcha questions. But Dr. Anastasia does something absolutely brilliant that shuts down the entire conversation in the most powerful way possible. So make sure you watch until the end. And please, comment down below where you're watching from. I really love to see people from all over the world connecting in here. Alright now, let's get into the video.
I'm sure something Graham will have a view about. This is the most extraordinary story of our time, really, in the way that it perfectly personified, I think, one of the big problems with the woke sort of scourge on our society, as I would put it. A transgender athlete called Jammie Booker won the world's strongest woman title several days ago and celebrated. You know, big picture, celebrating on the podium. And then there was an interesting exchange with the camera and the woman who came second, who was really pissed off about this and stomped off, and it looked rather graceless. Right to the point, it emerged that Jammie Booker is a biological male, is a man. And that was why Jammie Booker looked so much bigger than the female contestants, and why Jammie Booker won the title of the world's strongest woman. But Jillian Michaels, right here in this story, once it emerged that Jammie Booker was male, the organisers stripped Jammie Booker of the title and said they weren't aware that Jammie Booker identified as a trans athlete at all. They thought that she was a woman. What do you make of this? I mean, it seemed to me the fight back, this is why I say woke is dead, that the public reaction was so quick and so ferocious, and the official reaction was so quick to correct this, that this is why I believe wokeism is actually dead. Not everyone's got the memo yet, but the public tolerance of it is disintegrating.
Listen, I'm glad to see that Jammie was stripped of the title and it was given to a biological female, because I think fairness in sports is essential. It is the pillar of sports, along with safety and then inclusion. And often in many of these different categories, there are mixed categories for people like Jammie. Now, having said that, I completely disagree with you about woke being dead, Piers. I'm seeing craziness abound everywhere. And in fact, I think it was in the Carolinas regarding powerlifting, the Supreme Court just penalized the United States Powerlifting Association for not allowing biological males into sport with biological females, despite having a mixed category. So I think every step in the right direction is great here, but I don't think we're there yet at all.
Okay, Dr. Anastasia Gabriel, what do you make of this?
Well, I would push back on the idea that woke is dead and everything is about perspective. What does actually woke mean to you? For some, it might mean craziness, as the panelist said. For some, that might mean being more aware, more inclusive, and more progressive, and how we understand people who hold all kinds of differences. So to me, I'm not familiar with that particular case, so I will not comment on the decision. But what worries me the most is the kind of abuse and harassment that oftentimes emerges in these moments that actually affects people and populations beyond that one particular winner, and the kind of rhetoric that we, our society, are normalizing.
Yeah, but the problem, it seems to me, is when a society endorses, often legally, this kind of thing, you are going to piss off a lot of people. And the victims actually tend to be trans people who want to just get on with their lives quietly, not bother anyone, you know, may have gone through years of surgery in some cases, right? I've got full respect for those people. But when you as a society, when you say it's perfectly normal for biological men to compete against women, I say society loses its mind. And so people, when they see this, go, well, this is obviously unfair. Shouldn't be happening.
Well, Piers, I would respectfully challenge you.
So Piers Morgan opens this segment by calling the entire situation a woke scourge on society. And that framing right there tells you everything about where this conversation is heading. Because instead of actually discussing the nuance of athletic competition and fairness, he immediately turns it into culture war ammunition. And that is exactly the problem with how these conversations happen in mainstream media. Now here's what gets me. Piers said this around the 3-minute mark. Woke is dead. That the public reaction was so quick and so ferocious. This is why I believe wokeism is actually dead. The public tolerance of it is disintegrating. And I need you to understand why that statement is so dangerous. Because what Piers is doing here is declaring victory in a culture war that he has framed entirely on his own terms. He gets to define what woke means. He gets to decide when it's dead. And he gets to ignore everyone who disagrees with his framing. And this is where Dr. Anastasia Gabriel comes in and does something really important. She pushes back immediately and says, I would push back on the idea that woke is dead and everything is about perspective. What does actually woke mean to you? For some, it might mean craziness, as a panelist said. For some, that might mean being more aware, more inclusive, and more progressive. And that question right there is the question that conservatives hate answering. Because once you actually define what woke means, you realize it's just a catch-all term for anything they personally don't like. But here's the moment that really matters. Dr. Anastasia says, what worries me the most is the kind of abuse and harassment that oftentimes emerges in these moments that actually affects people, beyond that one particular winner. And that is the heart of the issue that gets completely ignored. Because yes, we can debate sports fairness all day long, but what happens when you turn one person into a national punching bag? What happens when millions of people pile on with harassment and cruelty? That real harm gets dismissed because people are too busy performing outrage. Piers then says, when you say it's perfectly normal for biological men to compete against women, I say society loses its mind. But notice the framing there. He's not asking if there are better ways to handle inclusion in sports. He's not asking how we balance fairness with dignity. He's just declaring that society loses its mind, which is his way of saying, my side is the only reasonable one. And that shuts down the conversation before it even starts.
On the idea of normal. This is an incident that has happened out of how many other victories where that has not been the case.
Why should it happen at all, though? If it was doping, we wouldn't allow
We live in a society
anything.
where all sorts of things happen, and to me, this is an opportunity to discuss these issues, to talk about what's normal.
Would you have gender-neutral Olympics?
I'm not sure that I would immediately subscribe to that position.
You're not sure?
No, let me finish, please.
Or would you allow men and women? Would you allow men and women to compete in one gender-neutral category at the Olympics in all the different sports?
Piers, it's lovely to be back. I would love to be able to finish my sentence.
Sure.
I would not necessarily argue for that position myself.
Why not?
However, because I do think that there are different athletic abilities. However,
bingo. Bingo. So you know it's unfair. That's my point. So you wouldn't allow it because you know that men have a physical advantage.
Piers, I cannot articulate my position in a rational manner.
You just answered
the previous sentence. No, you're cutting me off to not allow me to make my point. And if that's how it's going to be, I'll give the mic back to you.
Is there more to your point than you realize it's wrong to put the sexes together?
I am saying that society changes and notions like right or wrong are dependent on your perspective. So of course,
not really. They're dependent on things called biology and science in this case.
Well, there are myriads of very well-established scholars, activists, professionals who might disagree with you. So who are you to say that they're completely wrong? That's a part of the debate, Piers. That's part of the debate.
Anastasia,
there's no one right or wrong.
Even you don't disagree with me. You just said you think it's right that the sexes are kept apart in the Olympics.
I did not say, please do not put words in my mouth. I said that it's a nuanced issue, and I think there is a conversation
we separate the sexes.
That are gray areas.
Okay, let me ask you one more time.
That our society
Let me ask you one more time.
Okay.
Why do we separate the sexes in the Olympics?
At this point, I will not entertain your provocations.
Got it. No problem at all.
Thank you.
Can I answer it? Because there's a robust amount of data outside of what is observationally obvious
of course.
that men have superior athleticism across every single modality of fitness.
Of course.
And the reality is that when you mess around with fundamental truths like XY chromosome and XX chromosome, it is crippling to a society because we cannot solve problems when we can't agree on what's real and what isn't.
Yeah.
It's okay
Well,
to
No, I agree.
have
Okay, look, I want to bring in.
existed
Okay,
for these
throughout
individuals.
Anastasia, I'm afraid you
Transsexual
can't. I'm afraid,
individuals
Anastasia, you can't refuse to comment on this anymore, and then
Transsexual
start
individuals have existed
and then start
through
commenting on it
history.
again.
That is science as
All
well.
right, that's not how this works. Graham, welcome back to Uncensored.
Okay,
You got
Piers.
cleared yesterday of harassing a teenage trans activist, Sophie Brooks, on social media. You were convicted of damaging her phone. This came after she accused you. She was 17 at the time. Apparently, you called her a sociopath, a psycho, a domestic terrorist, and groomer on X. The judge said your social media posts did not amount to harassment. First of all, how do you feel about what went down in the verdict there?
Very good. I've been targeted by this group of men, most recently including Sophie, for about 10 years now. So it's nice to draw more attention to them. I'm hoping that finally the police will start investigating these men who have been harassing not just me, but dozens of women across the country, getting them arrested, suing them. These are basically a criminal gang, and the UK police, for some reason, are working for them. And the police have gone from being terrified of being called institutionally racist to being institutionally misogynist. And I'm. It's annoying that I had to go through all this, but I'm glad it's bringing more attention to.
You've been having a lot of wins, actually, in the last few months. It seems like common sense is beginning to prevail. The one thing that people say about you, which I think, I can understand why they feel it, it's not the campaign you've waged or the logic of your argument. It's sometimes the rhetoric you've used. When you look back over the last few years, notwithstanding the fact you yourself have been on the receiving end of vicious, horrible rhetoric, but if you had your time again, would you tone down the rhetoric?
So Dr. Anastasia tries to challenge Piers on his framing and says, I would respectfully challenge you on the idea of normal. This is an incident that has happened out of how many other victories where that has not been the case? And that is such a smart question because it exposes the manufactured panic. Conservatives love taking isolated incidents and turning them into existential threats. One case becomes a crisis. One example becomes proof of societal collapse. And that is intellectually dishonest. But then Piers does something that honestly frustrates me every single time I watch these kinds of debates. He starts rapid-firing gotcha questions designed to corner her instead of actually listening to her point. And you can hear it building when he asks, why do we separate the sexes in the Olympics at this point? And what he wants is for her to say something he can clip and use against her. He wants a soundbite, not a conversation. And this is the moment that defines the entire direct exchange. Dr. Anastasia looks at him and says, I will not entertain your provocations. And honestly, that is one of the most powerful responses I have seen in these debates. Because she recognized exactly what was happening. She saw that Piers was not asking in good faith. He was setting a trap. And instead of walking into it, she called him out directly. That takes courage, especially when you are the only liberal voice on a panel of 5 people who all disagree with you. Now, immediately after that, Jillian Michaels jumps in and says, there's a robust amount of data outside of what is observationally obvious that men have superior athleticism across every single modality of fitness. And look, nobody is denying that biological differences exist. That is not the debate. The debate is, how do we create systems that respect those differences while also treating people with dignity? How do we have sports categories that are fair without dehumanizing anyone? Those are the actual questions. But they get lost because everyone is too busy dunking on each other. And here is what really bothers me about this whole segment. Dr. Anastasia keeps trying to introduce nuance. She keeps trying to say there are gray areas, there are conversations we need to have. But Piers will not let her finish a single sentence. He interrupts her repeatedly, talks over her, and then accuses her of not engaging. That is classic bad faith debate tactics. You create an environment where someone cannot possibly make their point, and then you blame them for not making their point. It is infuriating to watch.
Every so often, there's a piece of cinematic entertainment that just feels bigger and bigger. Not another Hollywood reboot, but an epic story of courage, faith, and meaning. The Daily Wire has gone all out with this new 7-part series, The Pendragon Cycle: Rise of the Merlin. It's based on a book series by Stephen R. Lawhead, and it's a retelling of the classic King Arthur legend. The first official trailer just dropped. You should go and check it out. In this extraordinary world, pagan gods fall silent and empires collapse, but one man's vision ignites a civilization's rebirth. Merlin becomes the bridge between myth and history, shaping the destiny of kings. What's not to like? The Pendragon Cycle: Rise of the Merlin premieres exclusively on Daily Wire Plus on January the 22nd. Watch the full trailer now at dailywire.com.
Well, the thing about the rhetoric is it has to be understood in the light of the fact that, as I say, I've been targeted by these men for 10 years, for a decade. I lost my Father Ted musical because my colleagues wouldn't stand up for me in the face of this harassment. And I lost my marriage, as people know, because I lost my ability to make an income. So our family was put under pressure. So if ever I'm rude or angry or express myself forcefully, it's simply because I'm just disgusted by my colleagues who have watched me go through all this without a word of support. Ardal O'Hanlon recently threw me under the bus. He's never once called me to ask how I was doing. He's never once called to say he supports my campaigns against men and women's sports, against men and women's prisons. Yes, if I do express myself forcefully, it's simply because I'm very frustrated at the fact that people can't see what's evident.
And when you hear a debate like this, when we start off with, the world's strongest woman title being won by a biological male, right there is one of the problems, right? Is that people just hate to hear women, including someone on this panel, kind of defending this kind of stuff. I just find it completely baffling.
And also, they always say things like, this is a unique occurrence. It's been happening again. This has been happening for about 10 years. Laurel Hubbard, the weightlifter in New Zealand.
Weightlifter, 45 years old, nearly twice the age of any other contestant.
Yeah.
Very unsuccessful as a male weightlifter, suddenly an Olympian contestant.
And beat 2 Indigenous women. He now holds the women's record for weightlifting in New Zealand.
It's ridiculous.
It's insane.
Okay, let's lighten the load.
So now they bring Graham Linehan into the conversation. And this is where things take a really revealing turn. Graham talks about how he has been targeted and says, "I lost my Father Ted musical because my colleagues wouldn't stand up for me in the face of this harassment." And then he says, "I lost my marriage. I lost my ability to make an income. And look, I am not going to diminish anyone's personal struggles. Losing your career and your marriage is devastating." But what Graham is doing here is framing himself as the victim, while simultaneously defending rhetoric that targets vulnerable communities. Because here's the reality. When you use your platform to attack marginalized groups, when you call people groomers and sociopaths, there are consequences. And those consequences are not censorship, they are accountability. The question Piers asked was, would you tone down the rhetoric? And Graham essentially says no, because he believes he is fighting for something righteous. But what he does not acknowledge is the harm that his rhetoric causes to real people trying to live their lives. And then Graham says something that really exposes the core of his worldview. He says, people just hate to hear someone on this panel kind of defending this kind of stuff. And by someone on this panel, he means Dr. Anastasia. He is openly expressing frustration that she exists in this conversation, that she has a different perspective, that she will not just agree with the consensus. And that tells you everything about how these panels are designed. They want an echo chamber with one token voice to dunk on. Graham then brings up Laurel Hubbard and says, this has been happening for about 10 years. Laurel Hubbard, 45 years old, nearly twice the age of any other contestant. And again, we are back to the same tactic, taking isolated examples and using them to justify sweeping conclusions. Yes, there are complicated cases in elite sports. Yes, there are conversations about fairness that need to happen. But turning every single case into evidence of societal collapse is not productive. It is fear-mongering. And here's what I want you to take away from this entire segment. Dr. Anastasia was the only person on this panel trying to have a good faith conversation. She was the only one asking, what does this word actually mean? What are the broader consequences? How do we reduce harm? Everyone else was performing for the camera. Everyone else was interested in getting their viral moment. And the fact that she stayed composed, stayed thoughtful, and refused to take the bait, that is what real strength looks like in a debate. Not the loudest voice, not the most aggressive posture, but the person willing to ask the questions that make everyone else uncomfortable. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.